to come today and share some thoughts about Obamacare. That's by far the #1 issue we hear about in my office, whether it's the mail, letters, phone calls, what have you, when I'm out visiting with constituents, as I have been today. So we want to give you a legislative update, talk a little bit about what's driving the latest developments in Obamacare, and then also share my thoughts, or maybe more broadly the Republican Party thoughts for the law and what to do about Obamacare. So first, the update, I'd say there's 5 main areas to look at in the update. There's the website, the administration's delays, the enrollment numbers, the demographics of those enrollment numbers, and what's ahead of us. So the website. December 1 was announced as the day the website was supposed to be fixed and ready. The administration declared victory on December 1, despite the fall in the end zones. Everything was working well. It's not quite 100% yet. It's still operating somewhere between 80 and 100%, like what Yogi Berra, the famous catcher of the Yankees, used to say. 60% of the time it works 100% of the time. But it still has problems on the back end. So front end is what we see as consumers when we go to healthcare.gov. Back end is everything from that front end that transmits information to the administration, say the Department of Health and Human Services, states, and say a state Medicaid division, or an insurance company if you're buying a private insurance plan on the exchanges. They still have a lot of gaps in that data, still causing a lot of problems that I'm going to be mentioning a little bit later on. Second are the delays. Well, the delays are in part a result of the malfunctioning website. The deadline for enrollment for January 1 coverage, for instance, was supposed to be December 15th. That meant pick the plan and pay for a plan. That was pushed until December 23rd. It was then pushed until December 24th. Same thing with the payment. So payments now are, in some states, being pushed all the way to January 31st for your insurance if you picked it sometime before January 1. The administration has asked insurers to take those payments up to January 31st to provide retroactive coverage. Some of the other programs inside of Obamacare, like the pre-existing conditions insurance pool, was supposed to be a transitionary program because Obamacare eliminated a lot of the state high-risk pools. For example, we had one here in Arkansas. That was obviously supposed to end on December 31st because Obamacare's exchanges were going to be up and running. The administration extended that unilaterally, I would say without proper authority, until January 31st. They've now extended it to March 31st, which just goes to show the ongoing implementation problems that the law is having, that they have to keep pushing back these deadlines even further. Third, enrollments. This is one of the big issues that everyone wants to know more about, and also that you read about so much in the news. You've heard the number 7 million. That was the administration's own estimate. That's not my estimate. That's not a Republican Party estimate. That's the administration's estimate. They've been falling far, far short of those enrollment numbers. There are 14 states, maybe 16 states, I don't remember exactly, that have their own websites, their own exchanges, and 34 or 36 states that use the federal exchange, as Arkansas does. In the federal exchange, about 1.2 million people have enrolled through the end of the year. Sounds like a lot. They're actually projected they will have 1.8 million by the end of the year. So they got to increase 50% just to meet their own goals. Similarly, the state exchanges had about 1 million people enrolled. And remember, these are some of the most popular states in the union as well. They're running their own exchanges, like California, Illinois, and New York. So you might expect it to be higher. It was actually the same rough ratio, about 50% more than they had to get an increase of about 50% to get to the 1.5 million they projected. So all told, there's about 2 million, about 2.1 people who have enrolled through the end of December. Again, the administration was projecting it to be closer to about 3.3 million. And again, that's only as part of the 7 million. But most importantly, we have to remember, at least 5 million people lost their insurance in October and November and December. The numbers I just gave you, approximately 2 to 2.2 million, those are just enrollments into the exchanges. Presumably a lot of those people were ones who lost their insurance in the last 3 months of last year. And there's more who lost it who we don't know what they did. Maybe they bought a grandfathered plan on the private market. maybe they've gone without health insurance right now. It's possible they moved into a job and got coverage in a job as well. But on balance, it seems a reasonable estimate to say that Obamacare, which was supposed to be about insuring the uninsured, has actually done more to uninsure the insured in the first 3.5 months of its operation. The administration gave a hardship exemption to those people who lost their coverage because of Obamacare. You might say that's something of an irony that Obamacare itself is the hardship from which you get an exemption from Obamacare, but that means that those people don't necessarily have to enroll in the exchanges to get their insurance because they would be exempt from the tax penalty called the individual mandate if they lost their insurance because of Obamacare. The fourth update would be the demographics of the people who have enrolled in the exchanges. You've probably heard a lot about the demographics and the risk pool. Any insurance pool of any kind depends on a healthy mix of people who are going to pay premiums but be unlikely to make claims on it, and people who are going to pay premiums and be likely to take more in claims than the premiums they pay, such as health insurance, car insurance, home insurance, what have you. Well, the demographic data doesn't look great. The Obama administration needs, by its own estimate, about 2.8 million young people, what they call the young invincibles, people in their late teens, 20s, early 30s, who tend to be healthier and therefore don't make as many claims to be enrolled by the end of March. Through the end of last year, they only had about 500,000 enrolled. When you look at the state exchanges, which report their data independently and therefore have more accurate information than what we get from the federal exchange across all 34, 36 states, it looks a little bit worse. It looks like between 25 to 35% of people are 18 to 35, but 45 to 65% of the enrollees are over the age of 55, which means they tend to have higher health insurance claims, which means therefore that the stability of the insurance policies that are being sold is going to be very questionable. And the reason that's bad is it means higher premiums for everyone next year. And that will lead more people to leave the insurance pools, which just means higher premiums again. Now, individuals may not face that because Obamacare puts a cap on your out-of-pocket expenses, but we all pay for it as taxpayers because we pick up the bill beyond that cap. So if you have that kind of destabilization of these insurance pools, it's driving up the cost of everything, that means that we, all right here in this room, all in this town, this county, this state, are paying for it in the form of higher taxes and more deficit spending. Now, when we talk about young and older, what we're really trying to get at is healthy and sick, because you'd be just as happy to have someone who's 50 and healthy paying premiums as you would 20 and healthy paying premiums. That data is harder to get at, though. There is one way, though, that you could look at it, and that way is not reassuring. You could look at the kind of plans that are sold on the exchanges. There's 5 basic plans: platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and catastrophic. Now, all those plans more or less get subsidies. So if you're below 400% of the poverty level, you get some degree of subsidy for your premium. So your premium may be $400 a month, and you only pay $80, and the government kicks in $320. There's only one plan, though, the silver level plan, that has subsidies beyond that. So if you buy a silver level plan, the government pays its share of the subsidy for your premium, and then, depending on your expenses, it might also pay some share of your deductible or your co-insurance payments. Now, why do I bring that up? If you were going to the exchanges and you expected to use a lot of health care, you were sick, you had pre-existing conditions, whatever, you would most likely buy a silver plan because you get support not only for your premium, you get support for your out-of-pocket costs beyond your deductible as well. And in fact, the silver plan is by far the most popular plan on all the exchanges, pretty much uniformly across the country. So it's not hard evidence, but we can infer from that a lot of the people going to the pool are in fact sicker people who are going to be making more claims on the pool, which is going to drive up costs for everyone. So finally, on the update front, what does this mean looking ahead for the update? Unfortunately, I think it means that we're all going to be on the hook for a bailout of insurance companies. There are provisions in Obamacare that are designed to bail out the insurance companies if their costs are higher than expected. 2 main provisions. One is called reinsurance, and the second is called the risk corridor. The reinsurance program It's a $63 head fee that is paid for every insurance or insured beneficiary. So if you work and you get health insurance through your employer, your husband, but it also covers your husband, it covers your 3 children, that fee is paid on everyone on a per head basis, not a policy basis. That money goes into a fund. It's also obviously passed on to you in the form of higher premiums. And then that fund is used to pay for the health expenses of any individual over roughly $40,000 into about $250,000. That means that we're paying directly the cost that the insurance companies otherwise would be on the hook for paying for healthcare expenses. That's the reinsurance program. The second is the so-called risk corridor, which is funded by a tax as well, which is of course passed on to all of us in the form of higher premiums. And that just simply is a flat, straight bailout of insurance companies who face losses. If they face losses, then the government will just reimburse them for those losses, much like it did during the housing crisis to Fannie and Freddie and some of the big banks and to GM and to Chrysler. So that was designed with the hope, the expectation that it might be just one company that would face that kind of bailout. You know, some companies do better in 1 year, some companies do worse. The industry has to get together through paying taxes, we pass on to us, is going to bail out that one company because of the design of Obamacare, because of its disastrous rollout. What's probably going to happen is the entire industry is going to be bailed out. The money that supports that fund is not going to be adequate to bail out the entire industry, and therefore the cost for everyone is going to go up in the form of higher taxes and more deficit spending. So those are the updates. That's kind of the latest news over the last 3 or 4 weeks that we've seen in Washington, that we've seen in the House. What's kind of the underlying causes of these things? I would say that there's 5 shocks that Obamacare has caused to our healthcare system, to our economy. Those shocks are the website, the cancellations, the sticker shock, which you might call the doc shock, and then finally the job shock. The website, obviously, it was a disaster. The administration did not properly contract for the design of the website. As bureaucrats in Washington often do, they believe they can do it themselves without getting the proper kind of expertise. And it's kind of like, you know, me or my soldiers when I was in the Army, saying that just because we're trained as infantrymen, we could also fly a helicopter or perform maintenance on a helicopter. We're very well trained in our job, not in another job. People at Department of Health and Human Services may be trained in one job. They're obviously not trained in designing one of the most complex website rollouts that we've seen in recent times. There's all kinds of problems with the security of the website, as you've probably seen, either on cable news or reported in television. We passed some legislation in the House to try to address that. As I mentioned, the back end of the website is still not working perfectly. That's causing a lot of problems at doctors' offices today, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But the website certainly didn't help the rollout of Obamacare. But in the end, you can fix the website. Now, it may take hundreds of millions of dollars of wasted taxpayer money, and there are oversight hearings going on about why that money was wasted, and we will continue to investigate why that money was wasted. But in the end, they can fix the website. They can't fix the law, though. The law is intrinsically flawed, and that's why you're seeing so many of the problems today, like the cancellations or like the sticker shock. So in October, November, that was the first big news, the first instance of the shock of cancel policies. And that was mostly in the individual market, which nationwide, maybe about 15 million Americans here in Arkansas. The best estimates look to be about 50,000. Now, the president and some of his supporters minimize that by saying it's only 5% of the people. Well, if you're one of those 5% of the people who are losing your health insurance and you're perfectly happy with your health insurance, that's a pretty significant impact to you. Also, I would say it's more than double the number of people who so far have benefited from Obamacare, if you can call enrolling in their plans a benefit. A lot of people, though, have suggested that this was a bug of Obamacare. It wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It wasn't an unintended consequence, it was very much the intended consequence of Obamacare. The design of the law is to take choices out of the hands of hardworking Arkansans and their families and their doctors, and to put it in the hands of Washington politicians and bureaucrats, to say that we know better than you do what choices you should make about your health care and what kind of health care plans will best fit your budget. This is not speculation on my part. This is not Republican line. This is the administration's own words. In the summer of 2010, a few months after Obamacare passed, they issued a regulation. That regulation, for instance, defined some of the cost-sharing requirements of Obamacare and the mandates on individual coverage provisions. And they predicted in that very regulation the cancellations that would come to pass in the future. They predicted that these cancellations would happen. And that's because so many people had policies that suited their needs. Just like people have car insurance policies that suit their histories as a driver, the kind of vehicle they drive, or the amount of time they drive. I have a couple that goes to church with me in Dardanelle, a dentist and his wife. They lost their insurance plan. They're small business people. They are on the individual market. And part of the reason they lost their plan, they said, is because it didn't provide coverage for maternity or pediatric dentistry or pediatric vision and so forth. All very important parts of some people's health insurance coverage. When you're 57 and 55 years old and you have young grandchildren and grown children, though, it's not as much an important part of your health insurance policy. But they lost their policy because it didn't meet all of those mandates. Now, the president knew that. He knew that from the time that regulation passed. He even knew it during the time the law was being debated. He acknowledged that in March of 2010 at a roundtable discussion with House and Senate Republicans at the White House. And Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York, acknowledged that everyone knew this. Again, it's the design of Obamacare. They knew that they were misleading the American people when they said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Now, maybe he just misspoke, and what he really meant was that I like your health care plan, you can keep it, and I don't like many of your plans, because just a few months later, they passed the regulation that led to all these cancellations. The third shock is the sticker shock, and that's directly related to a lot of the mandates of Obamacare. So if you tell someone who's been driving a Ford all of a sudden that they have to start driving a Ferrari and pay for it, what's going to happen? Their payments are going to go up, obviously. Same thing, when you mandate the kind of benefits that every single American has to have in their policy, whether they want it or not, whether they want to pay for it or not, what's that going to do? It's going to drive up the cost for health insurance for everyone. Also, driving up the cost is the new regulations on the way plans are rated and shared. So that's why you've seen premiums going up double or even triple in some places. I've even heard of reports in Arkansas of people facing premiums that are being quadrupled. You would think with that kind of increase, you get a lot more value for your dollar, right? Wrong. Because health insurance, as you all know, is not just the premium, it's also the deductible and the copay. Lots of people have been facing double or triple increases on their premiums, only to learn that their deductibles are doubling or tripling as well, which means their out-of-pocket costs are going to increase by 6, 7, 800%. You know, there was an example in the paper a couple of weeks ago about a guy named Jerry Buckley from Marion, Arkansas. He had an individual market plan. In his old plan, his premium was $400 a month. His new plan at $600 a month, so he faced a 500 or 50% increase. Now, his deductible on his old plan was high, $7,500. His deductible on his new plan was even higher, $8,000. Now you might say, well, $500 increase from a $7,500 base is not that significant. I bet Jerry would probably disagree. But on his old plan, we had a lower premium and a lower deductible. He also had a co-insurance payment of zero. Everything was covered beyond that. He had no co-insurance payment. On his new plan that's available under the Obamacare exchanges, the most comparable plan, he's got a 30% co-insurance payment, which means he has to pay 30 cents on every dollar beyond that higher deductible, in addition to the higher premium that he's already paying. Doesn't exactly sound like a lot of value to me for Jerry Buckley. People are seeing that all across the state. In fact, the best estimates today show that using the administration's own data, again, not mine, not the Republican parties, not the House Republicans, but using the administration's own standards for what fits a affordable plan, there's not a single county in Arkansas when a couple making just under or just over 400% of the poverty line gets an affordable health insurance plan because their premiums are so high. So, and this is not, by the way, just historical. I would say you could look ahead as well and say those two shocks. No matter how good or badly the website may start working, the cancellations and sticker shock is going to continue and maybe only get worse, as I was mentioning earlier, given the imbalance in some of these insurance pools. So, for instance, the cancellations we saw in October, November, December were in the individual market, when people going out buying policies on their own. There's been some reporting recently, which is accurate, that in the small group market, so people who have, say 100 or employees or fewer, that those plans are going to start facing cancellation later this year, in the late summer and the early fall of this year, for the exact same reasons that the individual plans were canceled last year, because they don't cover all of the mandated so-called essential benefits, because they don't have, or they don't meet the cost sharing requirements. Again, this is not my estimates. This is the administration's own estimates, and I have them right here. I wrote them down. They're important enough to mention. This is from June of 2010, when the administration issued the regulation that caused so many of these cancellations. For a small employer, fewer than 100 employees, the administration estimated that 66% of all health insurance plans would lose their grandfather status. So 2/3 of all plans for small employers, tens of millions of people around the country, would lose their grandfather status. And that was just the middle range estimate. They estimated it could be as high as 80%. So it's going to continue to happen. It's going to move. If your insurance wasn't canceled because you had it from a small employer or even a big employer, you're not going to be immune from these cancellations, unfortunately. Because in the very same regulation, the administration predicted large employers, 45% was the modest or the middling estimate of how many people would lose their insurance. Almost half. And the high-end estimate, which I think, with Obamacare, it's usually best to estimate things are going to get worse before they get better, 65%. So again, 2/3 of all large employers with more than 100 employees could see their health insurance lose their grandfather status under Obamacare as well. The same thing with the premiums and the deductibles. Again, based on the enrollees, but the number and the health status of the enrollees and the exchanges, we're going to continue to see premium increases. Most recent reporting, for instance, estimates that premium increases in the small group market could be 20 to 25% later this year. What's the fourth shock? This is only starting to come out. You may have seen some news coverage about it recently. This is what I would call a doc shock, shock. People learning that in their new plans, which cost more for a premium and cost more out of pocket when you use it, they also have narrower networks of hospitals and clinics and doctors, in particular specialists. That's one way that costs are being held down is to constrict the number of doctors or clinics you can see. You may have seen a op-ed that has gained some fame a couple of months ago in the Wall Street Journal by a woman named Edie Sunday from San Diego. She had a rare form of cancer that she had survived, fortunately, through a combination of local care in San Diego and specialty care at Stanford University in the San Francisco area and MD Anderson in Houston, one of the country's great cancer centers. Her insurance policy was canceled, and the policy she could buy through the exchanges forced her to choose. Either she gets her local routine care in San Diego and can't go to the cancer centers, or she can choose a policy that covers the cancer centers but she can't get her local routine care. People are facing those choices over and over again, especially when it comes to more specialized services like pediatric care or children's hospitals. And it could also begin to get worse all across the country, particularly in states like Arkansas, where we have a doctor scarcity to begin with, because already a lot of doctors don't see Medicaid patients, for instance. Increasingly, in some parts of the state, they won't see Medicare patients because the government reimbursement rates for those beneficiaries are so low. You can see the same thing happening as Obamacare enrollees are going to the doctors and they're taking up more and more time, which ultimately is just a form of rationing. If you have to stand in line, to wait to get your care, that's just what the Soviet Union used to do with bread. You can have your bread, but you've got to wait for 14 hours. You can have your EKG, but you've got to wait 6 weeks to get it. And here in Arkansas, specialists are facing a cut of up to, I think it's 15%, based on the reimbursement rates under Obamacare. A related aspect of that kind of loss of access, unfortunately, is going to be for seniors on Medicare. $700 billion out of Medicare, particularly out of Medicare Advantage, which I bet some of you may use to fill in the gaps for your health insurance, to pay for the exchanges. That's just going to accelerate the trend that you unfortunately see in some parts of this state and lots of places around the country of doctors being unwilling to see Medicare patients because the reimbursement rates are too low. And lots of people all around Arkansas, lots of people here in Magnolia, in my hometown in Dardanelle, like my parents, rely on Medicare. That's their health care. And if their doctors are telling them they won't see them, that means that they're not getting the care they need. And that's all as a direct result of Obamacare. And that's before the independent, unaccountable, unelected board of bureaucrats called the Independent Payment Advisory Board, which was created by Obamacare, begins to dictate in ways that are insulated from congressional review the procedures that Obamacare will pay for Medicare patients. Finally, a fifth shock. This is not related to the healthcare system, except to the extent that healthcare is 16% of our economy, and a growing part of it is what you might call the job shock. I was just speaking earlier today with some folks in the landscaping business. They've got a great booming business. They want to open up a satellite office. They also want to add a lot of more business. And they could, but they have 49 employees today. And Obamacare caps the number of full-time employees. You can have at 50 before you're subject to all the mandates and the fines and the tax and the penalties of Obamacare. And that is the sole reason, they told me, that they are not hiring any more grounds crewmen. That's the sole reason why they aren't opening up a satellite office, because they don't want to hire a 50th employee. And by the way, that 50 employee limit applies to employees who work 30 hours a week, not 40 hours a week, which means that it's harder to get a job today that's paying full-time wages, because people want to put you in at 29 hours a week to help avoid the Obamacare penalties. And there's very clear data that suggests that Obamacare was having a drain on hiring full-time workers. The administration, in one of its many delays, delayed the so-called employer mandate, without authority, over the 4th of July weekend last year. Part-time job growth in the 6 months before that delay was massive, and full-time job growth was very limited. Since then, it's been inverted. There's been more full-time job growth, less part-time job growth. I think that's a direct result of Obamacare. Well, finally, what can we do about it? What's the solution to Obamacare? Well, the first thing I would say is the president frequently asks Republicans, what's your alternative to Obamacare? Republicans would never propose a law like Obamacare. We would not propose a law that attempts to centralize control over 1/6 of our country's economy and over the most intimate decisions you make about your life and your family's lives in Washington, D.C. We would propose tailored and targeted solutions to the very real problems in our healthcare system that existed before Obamacare and unfortunately continue to exist, like the cost of healthcare or the inability of some to get coverage because of pre-existing conditions. But for now, Obamacare is on the books, and we have to do everything we can to try to protect our constituents from the worst harms of that law. And we passed several bills in the House. Unfortunately, the Senate has seen fit not to go along, largely acting at President Obama's behest. So, for instance, that individual mandate that makes you pay a tax penalty if you don't get health insurance that Washington, D.C. thinks is suitable for you, we passed a bill that tried to delay that mandate. It got, I think, 25 or 30 Democrats to vote with us. We also passed a law trying to codify that delay of the employer mandate, because we believe it's good to delay or actually repeal the employer mandate, but we want it to be done in a legal and constitutional way that will withstand judicial scrutiny. Again, we got about 35 or 40 Democrats to vote with us on that. In November, in the middle of the cancellation controversies, we passed a law called the Keep Your Health Care Plan Act. Very simple law. It said if you had a health insurance plan in 2013, then you could keep it into 2014. The president, under political pressure, announced the day before we voted on the House floor on that bill that he would implement the same change administratively. Again, I don't think he has authority to do that, but his political objective was to prevent a rout in the House of Representatives. As it were, we still had 40 Democrats vote with us to pass that Keep Your Health Care Plan Act. If the president hadn't spoken the day prior and done the same thing administratively, we would probably have 100 Democrats vote with us. Since we got back from the Christmas and New Year's holidays, we passed legislation out of the House that would insist that the government notify you if your data has been compromised as a result of the health insurance exchanges or Medicaid or Obamacare more broadly, just like any company must notify you. We passed legislation this week to address some of the data security problems, as well as to insist that the administration become more transparent. These are all attempts on our part to mitigate some of the worst harms of Obamacare until we can repeal it entirely and replace it with those kind of targeted and tailored solutions to the very real problems that exist. Well, what are those? As I mentioned, the high cost of health insurance, or the lack of some people to get pre-existing conditions, or the inability of some people to get care because of pre-existing conditions. Well, Arkansas had a high-risk pool, like a lot of states did, that enabled people who couldn't get health insurance because they had a pre-existing condition, because they had cancer, because they had diabetes, or so forth. They could go into that high-risk pool, they could get insurance, and they could get into the insurance market, and they could transition out of it. That's the kind of state-based solution that provides assistance to those who need it most, and also gets them into the insurance system entirely that Obamacare destroyed intentionally, even though, as I mentioned now, they've had to extend the life of their own pool at the federal level because the exchanges are working so poorly. One reason the cost of health insurance and health care is so high is that there's not enough transparency and competition within the insurance market itself. So just like you can buy your car insurance from Flo at Progressive or the Geico across state lines, we would also let people buy their health insurance across state lines. So insurers will have to compete for your dollars, and when companies are competing for your dollars for whatever the product or the service, it always drives down prices, and it drives up quality, and it drives up service, because you can take your money somewhere else if your provider isn't caring for you. We'd also equalize the tax treatment of health insurance for individuals. If businesses get tax rates for providing health insurance to their employees, individuals who work on their own or who have small businesses should be able to get the same thing for themselves. We require more transparent pricing by providers, so you know that the cost of an MRI in one town is 400% more than the cost of an MRI in another town. And then you can go shop for better value for your dollar, just like you would in almost any other circumstance. Try to hold down the cost of frivolous lawsuits by having medical malpractice reform in the context of government-sponsored health insurance, like Medicare, like Medicaid, like the state children's health insurance program, like TRICARE, and so forth. These are all, again, very simple, tailored solutions to address the very real problems we've had in our health insurance system. Because there were problems before Obamacare. There are problems with Obamacare. There will continue to be problems with it. But the way we can solve those problems is to repeal the law and to replace it with those patient-centered, doctor-focused solutions. So you don't have government bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. trying to dictate to you what they think is best for you and your family and your budget. You all know what's best for you and your families and your budget. Now, those solutions aren't going to be implemented overnight. There's a long way to go. But we are working every day in the House, and I'm working every day for you to try to solve these very real problems. Because this is, right now, the number one issue that so many Arkansans, like so many Americans, are facing in their day-to-day lives, making it hard for them to put ends meeting together, or to even get the insurance that they need or that their children need. It's going to make it harder for their parents or their grandparents to get the coverage they need. But as we said in the Army, hard is not impossible, and long is not forever. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to implement those reforms sooner rather than later, so we can get everybody the kind of insurance they need at the value they want. So that's my kind of take on where we stand with Obamacare, latest updates, as well as what's driving some of the problems and some solutions to it. I'm happy right now to take questions that you might have about anything I've discussed, or if you've got other questions you might want to ask, you can fire them away. I'm also happy to let everyone leave to go get to the tip-off of the first game, or if you've got dinner or a date with your spouse or a significant other. I know it's Friday night, and I appreciate you all coming out and sharing your time with me. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if we're all of a like mind here because we're a pretty small group. We may be.
I you can always count on disagreements in this line of work.
Good. But nevertheless, maybe we're hopeful that Obamacare implodes. It would be reassuring to know that the Republicans are really putting their heads together to be able to act when that happens.
Yeah.
A united front among the Republicans is hard enough right now. I want to understand that Republicans want full repeal under all circumstances. We don't want to work with this plan at all, do we?
Well, no, I stand for the repealing Obamacare and replace it with some of those ideas I mentioned. You mentioned the talk, some people, not many people, frankly, I serve, but sometimes I see on TV or read on internet blogs or in the editorial pages people who say, don't do anything to Obamacare, let it implode under its own weight. I just feel as a elected leader for 750,000 Arkansans, I have a responsibility to try to protect them from as much harm as possible. That's not a matter of changing the law in ways that are going to preserve it. That's a matter of trying to protect them from the harms of, say, paying a tax because they can't afford insurance, or losing their insurance, or having their personal identifiable information compromised and not even knowing about it. And I think there's a large consensus in the Republican Party, and frankly, if you look at vote totals recently in the House, there's a lot of Democrats who are coming around to that point of view as well.
Just wondering how much chaos we're going to see in 2013.
Well, unfortunately, Obamacare has already caused a lot of chaos over the last 3.5 months. And again, a lot of the problems identified are only going to get worse. Part of the reason why they're only now emerging is the website was malfunctioning for so long. The website didn't solve the problems of Obamacare. It just, once it was improving, it helped reveal some more of the problems. So people who couldn't get on the website in October didn't realize that their premiums might double or triple or even quadruple, or that the deductible might go from 0 or 1,000 to 5,000 or 10,000. That's why, one reason, in my opinion, enrollment numbers are so low, not because the website was malfunctioning in October, but because in December and now in January, people are on the website and realizing that the health insurance that they can get is not affordable for them. And that's, again, the enrollment period ends on March 31st, so we won't know for sure how many people have enrolled for another 2.5 months. Now remember, there's still at least 5 million people who have lost their insurance that we have to account for as well. We, again, in the House have made an effort to try to delay or repeal the individual mandate penalty. I would not be surprised to see the President on April 1st, maybe wait till April 2nd, so it didn't seem like a joke, administratively repeal the individual mandate himself. Because he's already done it for a certain segment of the population. He's done it for people who lost their insurance, those at least 5 million people who lost it. It'll be very hard to tell other people who didn't lose their insurance but couldn't afford it before Obamacare and can't afford it now that, oh, you have to pay the tax penalty, but these 5 million people here, they don't have to pay the tax penalty. He may just be waiting right now until the enrollment period ends so he can use the threat of the penalty to force people to buy the insurance now and then tell them on April 2nd, actually, you don't have to pay the penalty after all.
Unfortunately, it's such a slow evolution because so many folks are still ignorant of the law. They're absolutely ignorant of what is about to evolve.
Well, that's certainly true with a lot of congressmen and senators. But it's been true since they voted on it, too.
Yes, that's right. We have to vote on it first.
Yes,
If
sir.
and when Obamacare is repealed, how much more is it going to cost us because of these people that have joined and are their higher risk, they can't get insurance anymore? How much more is that going to cost? And does Congress realize that the well is nearly dry? You can't keep
Sure.
taxing people like you're doing.
Well, this is part of the problem with Obamacare is the cost. I mean, it was originally estimated, I think, somewhere around $900 billion or $1 trillion in the first 10 years. Re-estimates have moved that closer to $2 trillion. I expect estimates next year will move that north of $2 trillion. And there's a lot of taxes to pay for that, of course. But this, in the end, I'm afraid, going to be more deficit spending when we're already $17 trillion in debt. It's unclear what a post-Obamacare world will look like in terms of cost, because we don't know what the enrollment numbers will be or how long it's going to last. Remember, a lot of the people going to the exchanges are people who had health insurance that they were very happy with. They were happy with the price of it. They were happy with the coverage of it. It suited their needs. They're like Edie Sunby in San Diego. You know, the health care they were getting in the pre-Obamacare world, that helped save their lives. So just because they're going into the exchanges now doesn't mean they want to stay there. A lot of them would rather not be there. A lot of them would rather be back in the individual market. They'd rather be in a small group plan, and those small group plans get canceled later this year. So it's cost overall, because what do you do anytime you put more competition and more choice into any kind of marketplace? You get lower prices, and you get better quality, and you get more service. And that's what we've been lacking in our healthcare system for so long.
Committees are you on?
I'm on the Financial Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. I can tell you how some of the regulations that the Obama administration is imposing on the housing bill is hurting the people it's designed to help in places like Columbia County and Yale County, but it's a whole different kettle of fish. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of people, especially lower income individuals or first-time home buyers, who are being priced out of the market right now because of the regulations that the administration is imposing, just like the regulatory problems you see in the health insurance place.
Don't let the next 3 years burn you out. We need you.
I'll try not.
I don't know how you can do it without pulling your hair out. But.
Yes, sir.
For myself, I'm retiring at the end of January, which is work for Albemarle for 33 years. And because of my age and some things around Albemarle, I don't get insurance through Albemarle after January 31st. So I'm out looking for the individual insurance. And so what I'm finding is for myself, through Arkansas Blue Cross and Blue Shield, it's better to look at paying the tax and getting a program that's not based on Obamacare. I mean, tremendously
Sure.
cheaper to do it that way than go with the Obamacare.
Sure.
Because you got to answer a lot of medical questions to make sure that you
Sure.
qualify for that. But deductibles are a whole lot lower.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, the premiums are 2 and 3 or 4 times less than the health care. I mean, it is
Yeah.
really
Um,
eye-opening.
Yeah, no, it is eye-opening. You know, this is what the president and some of his senior aides were calling, you know, the substandard, unregulated, Wild West plans that Obamacare was designed to cancel. And then when the political pressure got too hot, they said you can keep your unregulated, substandard, Wild West plan if you want it. But your situation is not unique. There are many people who would be financially better off by paying the tax penalty and buying a non-Obamacare compliant plan, because it suits their needs and it suits their
Still
budget.
do that?
Yeah,
You
You can still do
buy
that.
a plan that's out of the exchange.
sure. You just have to pay the tax.
Right. Which is
Now remember,
$92
now remember to be
Well,
precise.
It's capped at 285 for this year.
To be precise, this year it's $95 or 1% of your income.
Well, up to a cap of 285 is the way I understand it, we're paying one.
That may be right. That may
That's
be
the way
right.
I
Now
do it.
it increases steeply
Yeah,
after this
each year,
year.
yeah,
So don't
each year.
so don't think that
Yeah,
you're going to be able to
2015.
avoid Obamacare without paying some financial consequences.
Right.
But also remember that because the individual mandate penalty is so unpopular, the Democrats who drafted and passed Obamacare in 2010 couldn't give the IRS its traditional enforcement tools. So the only way the IRS can enforce that penalty against you is if you have a tax refund and they can withhold the money from the refund. So let's say you owe a penalty of $200 and you get a refund of $550. Well, the IRS can just give you $350 and withhold it. They can't garnish your wages. They can't put a lien on any property you own.
That's today, right?
They can't take
You
it.
could change that.
They could, but given the unpopularity of Obamacare in general and the mandate in particular, I don't think you'll see that changed, even if you were to get the kind of Democratic supermajorities in the future that you had in 2009 and 10. If they couldn't pass it through that Congress to give the IRS more power, particularly after the IRS scandals of the last year, I don't think the IRS is going to be getting more power anytime soon. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it very much. If you want any more information or have any more questions, please feel free to visit our website, cotton.house.gov. It's always great to be back to see some old friendly faces. basis and to see some new faces as well. So thank you all, and have a great extended weekend, I hope.